Cornhusker Connection Top 10 Rankings, brought to you by the Cornhusker Connection Network. Would be a great spot for a sponsor if you know anybody who would like to pay to advertise a podcast that gets 3 views per episode. New 1 and 2. The entire season, the Cornhusker Connection rankings have ended up with Georgia and Michigan 1 and 2. Not the case this week. Start from the top, we got Michigan, Washington, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Florida State, Penn State, and North Carolina, followed by Oregon and Texas as the 2 losers. Now, I've talked about how I do my rankings, and because it looks a little bit funny. It looks a little bit different than the other rankings. It's not so silly where Florida State's number 1 by any means, but I break these teams down into tiers. Here's how I do my rankings. Top tier, teams that have a really good win, and they haven't been challenged by inferior teams. So that tells me that you have a high ceiling. You can beat really good teams. I've seen you beat really good teams, and you don't struggle with inferior competition. So your floor is higher, which is why Washington, Oklahoma, and Ohio State are in that top 3. Washington's win against Oregon, it may be the best win in the country, depending on how you feel Oregon versus Texas. Oklahoma, if, however you feel about Oregon, Texas, the other way, Oklahoma could very well have the best win in the country. Ohio State, again, probably depending on how you feel about Notre Dame. I still think beating Notre Dame is a very impressive win, especially in the manner in which they did. As far as having to come from behind on a late second drive, that's impressive to me. That's a good win. That counts. Then neither of those teams, outside of those 3 really competitive games with good teams, have broken a sweat. So give me that. Granted, Ohio State, I hear this. Ohio State didn't play great against Maryland. So what? They won by 3 touchdowns in second gear. That to me is a sign of a really good football team. And then you have the next tier where they haven't broken a sweat, but they don't have that signature win. So really high floor. They're probably not going to get tripped up by an inferior team. But neither of the teams ahead of them, and they have a great win. So you just don't get enough credit. Teams like that, Michigan, Penn State. Michigan and Penn State are the big 2. Georgia, you could put in this category. You could put Georgia in this tier. If they're not in this tier, then it's the next one where they're undefeated, but they've struggled a little bit with inferior opponents. So that would be Georgia, Florida State, North Carolina, getting pushed around by Appalachian State. So those 3 teams, 2.5 teams, depending on how you feel about Georgia's performance against teams like South Carolina. They're probably more in the tier of the second tier teams, but I mean, you could talk me either way there. And then you have the loser tier where it's you have a loss, but it's against the top 4 team in the country, and Texas and Oregon. So those are my rankings: Washington, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Georgia, Florida State, North Carolina, Texas, and Oregon. Again, it feels funny having Georgia down that low, having Michigan outside of the top 3. But, I mean, that's just kind of how I see it. And now, granted, if Michigan goes and beats Penn State, that's the signature win. They're right back in that top tier. And, I mean, I'll tell you what, too. I love Penn State. That might be the best win in the country. They might be back to number 1 for me. But, again, I got to see it. Let's see. I mean, none of the other guys are really here to defend themselves. Florida State up at number 1 is crazy to me. Also equally crazy to not have Florida State in the top 10, but I appreciate them both being so adamant on their stances. I'm pretty sure we have the same 10 teams. Tyler has Oregon State at 8. Who does he not have? He doesn't have. He doesn't have Florida State. That's who. I'm actually not. I definitely don't like Oregon State above Texas, but it is what it is. He's a newlywed, so he gets a bit of a pass there. So it is what it is. That also brings us to our college football playoff. So top 4 teams, if the season were to end right now, granted, obviously this won't happen because Michigan and Ohio State would be playing each other, but Washington, Georgia would be a crazy game. But yeah, you could probably swap out the loser of Michigan, Ohio State with Oklahoma there. I couldn't quite get to put together the 12-team playoff, but yeah, you know what? Let's go through it here. So we got plenty of time here. So we're gonna have the top 4 conference champions. I got a new phone, so it logged me out of everything. Entertaining. Entertainment at its finest, huh? Okay, so top 4, top 5, top 6 conference champions. So you got Georgia, Michigan ahead of Ohio State. Do they get the bye? No, 4 teams get a bye. So Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Washington each get a bye. And then you have the next best conference champion, which would be Oklahoma. They get to host a game. Then you have Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, and Oregon hosting a football game as well. Then you also and Air Force. Air Force also hosts the game, so not Oregon. So that's 9 teams. Yeah, that's not right. Those teams are in. Then you also get teams like North Carolina, Alabama, Oregon State, Mississippi in as of right now. So I mean, I think great week of college football coming up. Nebraska and Northwestern. That's a good Big 12 games. We'll talk about that coming up here on Go Big 12 or Go Home, also on the Cornhusker Connection Network. So if I'm not mistaken, that episode's already out by the time that you're listening to this. Go check that out. The Iowa broadcasting legend Drew Russell talking about the Big 12. Great time to be an Iowa State Cyclone fan, I'll tell you what. So we'll talk about the Clones. We'll talk about how the conference is shaping up. Is there anybody who can get to Arlington outside of teams who embody the Red River rivalry? Who knows? But nonetheless, great stuff here on the Cornhusker Connection Network. We got you covered every single day starting now. We had a couple weeks off. Tyler got wedding, cut him some slack. But that'll do it for me here on the Cornhusker Connection show. Shout out again, Tyler and Sophia. Congratulations on your marriage. And hope you guys are celebrating as you should. Go Big Red.